We are going to be live tonight.
I'm barely alive.
See that?
I have a cold and I don't want to cough on anybody.
I appreciate
I had the funeral go today.
I had 7 people.
I wasn't there, you know, because I got home and talked to him.
I did your part. We had 8. We had 5 shooters.
Want to take a picture? Take a picture.
Let me tell one. It's on my phone.
You want to give it to me, send it to me now. You still have the guys that don't have the info, right?
That's what I said, that's the problem. My issue is.
Oh, Phil.
There you go. Thank you, folks. Okay. We get it cut back.
We put a lower off together. They probably never called the guy they was shoplifting in Walmart.
Was he stealing the truck in half?
Yeah, and that had stolen plates from South Carolina on the truck.
Oh, but
That's
they
right.
stealing everything.
And he was in my house. And he was in my house. Yeah.
Still got everything?
You had a gun in the back you didn't see, I guess, because it was for everything else was locked out.
Guess I feel asleep.
He is his own way behind traffic, so I was told him to see how you are. David. 601.
Okay, planning commission members, members of the public. It is 6 p.m., December the 19th. I call the planning commission meeting to order. Okay, we have the review and approval of the November 21st, 2023 meeting minutes. You received a copy for review. Do I hear any additions or corrections?
Make a motion, we accept.
We have a motion and a second to approve the meeting minutes. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The minutes are approved as submitted. Next is a public hearing, renewable energy text and policy. And first is the comprehensive plan policy amendment. Ms. Black, you have guidance for us?
We will start by just introducing tonight Mr. Michael Zahner with the Berkeley Group. He has traveled a long ways to be here with us tonight. And I really appreciate the Berkeley Group for helping us through this process. I'm very thankful to get to this point in the process. So without further ado, Mr. Michael Zahner with the Berkeley Group will give us a PowerPoint presentation and kind of go over through some of the things that we have worked with him on the past year.
And if it works for you all, I think right now I'll just stick with the policy, and then we can, when you go to the public hearing for the regulations, we can focus on that. But it's just a brief presentation. I'm glad to be here with you all in person tonight. Always good to be in person rather than virtual. So you can go to the next slide, please. So just quickly, right now we'll cover the first two bullets, but talk about existing policies, a little bit on existing regulations, kind of the reason why we're at this point, and then cover the amendment to the comprehensive plan that covers generally renewable energy land use, but also solar and wind. Next slide, please. So existing policies and regulations, of course, you have the county's comprehensive plan. It's a policy guidance document. It helps inform the development of regulations, but it also helps inform actions on discretionary permits as well. And we would recommend that for impactful land uses, and solar and wind, utility scale solar and wind can be impactful from a land use standpoint, that we do recommend that they be addressed from a policy standpoint in the comprehensive plan. And presently, the county's comprehensive plan is virtually silent with respect to those land uses. And then touching on your ordinance presently, and we'll cover that more in depth, but your current regulations for wind turbines and towers and solar generally allow for solar that's below 100 kilowatts as a by right use. Anything beyond that requires a special use permit without much in the way of guidance, requirements, regulations for applications. And then for wind, anything over 100 feet in height and or 100 kilowatts is also subject to a special use permit. And of course, we're working with you all to develop regulations for both of those. So next slide, please. So with respect to the comprehensive plan amendments, what we've done is drafted that up, would be an addendum to your comprehensive plan. So hopefully you can just attach right in. I know you all are working on other updates, and at some point it may be something that you want to insert these regulations into the body of the plan. But I think adopting it as an addendum to the plan would allow you to pick that up and use it to review applications. Obviously, consider the ordinance and amendments to the ordinance. So the plan really lays out general policies, and I won't read these verbatim, general policies that are applicable to renewable energy. We certainly work with you all, work with Jada to formulate these and get us to this point. And certainly benefit from public comment as well as your comments on these and eventual recommendation of the Board of Supervisors. So we have, I believe, 5 general policy statements with respect to renewable energy broadly. If you go to the next slide. And these are the remaining 2 of those 5. And then next slide. Then we go into specific policy statements with respect to solar first. And again, I won't read these verbatim, but they cover pretty much everything that's outlined in your regulations. Some are more subjective, some are more objective. And hopefully they inform, again, the development of the regulations and give support for the regulatory content, but also for the review of discretionary permits, special use permits. And we have, I believe, 13 policy statements with respect to solar. If you can go to the next slide. Actually 12. Go to the next slide. And then another 10 that are specific to wind. And they focus on each and the unique characteristics of each, but certainly there's overlap. For instance, proximity requirements to transmission lines and also buffering from certain zoning districts, resources, and the like. But the goal here, again, is to ensure that there's a balance between land uses, things that you all value in the community, as we talked about before, natural resources elements, but preservation of people's enjoyment and welfare, and hopefully balancing the benefits of the use with the potential impacts of the use. And so that's really what we've tried to do through the comprehensive plan amendments. And with that, I'm happy to address any questions that you may have on the content, either now or after you hear any public comment.
You mentioned anything on accessory, you said up to 100 megawatts. It's actually 50 megawatts.
50 kilowatts, I believe.
50 kilowatts.
Yeah, and that's part of the regulations, correct. We've I think we talk about accessory, making sure that that's not precluded in the policy. And then certainly as part of the regulations, we ensure that that's allowed, and I think it's up to 50 kilowatts.
That's right, yes.
Anyone else?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Yeah, when you talk about balancing the benefits to the county, what type of benefits are we talking about here?
Well, you know, it can come with it can be viewed as an economic development activity. Well, tax benefits. And with solar, there can be siting agreements as well. You know, some communities, some localities view solar, renewable energy, wind, it does in some cases create short-term jobs, which does have some potential benefit. But we perceive that there are no real long-term benefits of that. But many localities perceive that there's a financial benefit associated with solar because it does allow for increased tax revenue on properties that wouldn't normally see that level of development. And some of the siting agreement negotiations with solar in particular can be lucrative for localities.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. With the chairman not here yet, Mr. Ware, I would ask if you would have a motion to open up public hearing.
Do I hear a motion to open up the meeting for a public hearing?
So be it.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, motion and a second. Any discussion? We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. We're open for the public hearing.
It's probably just me.
Later.
Just read the names. Michael Stevedman?
Yeah, Stedman, yes.
Yes. Okay. You're not a county resident?
No.
Okay. You have, I believe, 5 minutes, right?
Well, it's up to you. I mean, it's up to the planning commission. I realize that typically we always give 3 minutes tonight. Looks like we've only got 2. So that'll be up to the planning commission if you'd like to give longer.
Anybody object to 5 minutes?
I won't be long. Try to keep it short.
All right.
Hey guys, my name is Michael Stedman. I work for Renewables. On behalf of them, we are, as you know, working on a wind farm in this area on Buck Mountain. So I've been here before a few times and talked about it, and I guess thank you for letting me speak. Thank you guys for your work in putting together this ordinance amendment comprehensive plan review. It's a lot of work. I know you've been working at it for a long period of time. Ultimately, overall, I think it's thorough, it's solid, and I don't have a lot of, I guess, recommended or suggestions on it. It provides, and I believe you have a letter I submitted, yeah, I'm seeing on some of
For the record, I was able to print that, and they all have that in their hands.
Okay, good. The overarching summary of this is I think this ordinance is really good. And the key thing about that is it provides a lot of opportunity for public involvement and feedback, as well as hearings, making sure that we fit within the comprehensive plan, making sure that we have a public hearing with the Board of Supervisors and receive approval for that with their recommendation to the next next board, to the planning commission, or excuse me, planning commission meeting, followed by their recommendation to the board of supervisors, and a final vote within that. So that's, by my count, at least 4 public hearings revolving around this project in general. And it puts fully the onus on us to make sure the community is involved and on board with it. If they're not, I think it'll be relatively clear through that process. The requirements of those applications, I think they will answer just about every question that you have. And I will be in a similar situation here to this to answer additional questions for that. And I believe that the Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission will have broad latitude to interpret the ordinance as written and the regulations to ensure that this project fits within the county and can vote accordingly, whatever that may mean to them. There's 2 things about the ordinance that I think handicap us from the start. I reference those in the letter. It's the proximity to transmission lines and then the distances from towns, cities, and zoning districts. I would ask for you guys to perhaps think a little bit more closely along that line. First of all, by the nature of a transmission line, they tend to follow population centers. So if you're restricting development to within 2 miles of a transmission line, you're already putting that within where the population follows within this area. And ultimately, I don't think it's necessary. The regulations, the writing as is, that we have to prove that this fits within it, is already the hoop that we have to jump through. By starting as it is today, you pretty much tell us exactly where we can and can't go, and makes the rest of it not arbitrary per se, but I guess not as important. If you look at the final map, I think that's the key takeaway. As we interpret the regulations as they're written, everything that's in green are the areas without taking any other regulations into account. That doesn't incorporate USDA soil recommendations within there. It doesn't incorporate property lines, other residences, anything like that. That purely interprets staying within 2 miles of existing transmission lines and a 1 mile setback from rural residential zones. You can see that pretty much shrinks this county, which is 285,000 acres, down to 16,000 acres available for potential development to come to you to prove that they can then do them. Just because an area is available for development does not mean it will get approved. Ultimately, we have to prove that to this board if that is the case. So my ask for your consideration, I suppose to put it that way, is to think of it in that lens. There's other opportunities. Just because an area is available for development does not mean it'll be outright approved. But ultimately, it'll come down to you guys. And I think there's a couple small things that could be addressed in the ordinance to make that better. I think the rest of it, frankly, is a lot of information that will help you and aid you in making that decision. And we're willing to go above and beyond to provide that. I will stop there. Thank you for your time. I should have got my time out.
I have a
Yes.
question.
Oh, yes.
All right, on this map,
Yes, sir.
the green area you show here, that's the available development area given our restrictions?
Yes, sir. That's my interpretation of it. There is a difference. It is for utility scale wind and solar, which is defined as more than 1 turbine, I believe, maybe 2. So it doesn't, it's purely talking at that level.
Utility scale would be probably 1 to feed a home. That's how we define the utility scale.
I think it would be the opposite. Utility scale goes directly to the grid.
I'm sorry.
And then the
Accessory.
distribution, accessory perhaps is the term. That is what would go through the home or someone's.
But the utility could be 1 or 2.
Yeah.
In the area, 5 miles apart. Not the 2 of the one landowner, but let's say landowner A puts 2 windmills on his property. Landowner B now wants to put a windmill on his property. He must be 5 miles away from that.
Depends on how you determine what a project is, I believe.
I'm sorry, say that again.
I think it depends on how you determine what a project is. There are some kind of frankly confusing things away around how that's written. The way that,
Give me a for instance.
oh yeah, I mean, the way that I see it is this project, as we look at it, would be 10 turbines along Buckmount. There's multiple parcels and landowners that would be involved. We have to get those people on board with, private citizens, we have to sign them up to do that. And so that would be 10 turbines along that wall. The way that I interpret it would be no other project separate from us could be within 5 miles.
That's not the way I don't believe that's the way we interpreted that.
I guess I would ask for some clarification around that. If the
One-
intent is-
One project would be the landowner. Project B has to be 5 miles away.
I believe that was the way that we had,
Right.
Michael, if you want to chime in here, because I feel like that would be a question that maybe you can clarify for us, because you worked with us long and hard on that.
I believe you're saying the same thing. So if you had a project that covered multiple parcels or one parcel, and that was a distinct facility, the boundaries of that project area, which presumably would be the parcels, would have another project, the boundaries of that project would need to be 5 miles away.
So landowner A, to be clear, landowner A has multiple acres. He wants to put 2 windmills on his property.
Utility scale, correct.
Utility scale,
Yes.
correct. So the next landowner,
Would need to be at least 5 miles.
5 miles away. Thank you.
Yes.
Michael, is that the way you would also interpret it?
Yeah, I think the confusion is interpreting landowner versus project. A project can have multiple landowners,
Correct.
and that is where I think the confusion is coming from.
That's correct. We would anticipate in most cases, especially for solar, that there will be multiple landowners. But it could be the case for wind as well, where there will be multiple parcels owned by multiple different landowners.
So they can call that a project and put 20 windmills up and that's one project?
Yes, sir, as long as it meets all the other standards, correct.
I was under a different assumption when we wrote this. That it would be a utility scale per landowner. I may be wrong, but that was my understanding of how this was to work.
Projects can be made up of multiple parcels for utility scale. And for accessory, and maybe that's where some of the question is accessory solar, you want to put, or accessory wind, where you want to put a turbine at your property, at your house, that would be for your use of your property.
Yes.
Whereas utility scale, that's feeding into the transmission network. Solar especially, but I can imagine it would occur for wind, where there would be multiple parcels and multiple landowners potentially comprising a project.
Just for clarity, I didn't think that we interpreted that way. Am I correct or am I incorrect?
Commission? How did you interpret the 5 mile rule?
The 5 mile. I was assuming that it was like that, with a landowner, but I mean, whenever they started talking about the project, I thought, well, a project could be more than that, so I'm not secure on any side of it there, but I think it is. I don't know. Look back.
Gary?
I'm kind of like Bob. I thought it was a little bit more restrictive than that.
I guess
I might be.
we never defined a project as how many windmills can be on it, except I think there's a rule that says it has to be 150. You got one, the closest, the next one can be is 150%.
Of the height, correct. And
Right.
basically what it also says is, bear with me 1 second.
I think we need to define the word project then.
So there's a So minimum project area, and this is on page 23, and it's 3-14.3.5.3. Minimum project area for utility scale wind energy facilities, the minimum project area, i.e. the area of lots or parcels comprising the project, shall be no less than 5 acres per turbine proposed. So you could have 10 acres comprised of multiple parcels. And that would afford you two turbines.
That's what I remember.
Yeah. And I think we talked about that point at one of our meetings.
Well, we must have missed that, or we wouldn't have had that 150% rule between turbines.
Right.
That's more what I remember.
Is the commission good with moving forward with the language as it is wrote?
I am.
Not pressed.
Yep.
You are.
I think that's what I mean, if that's what we,
But we didn't perceive that a sticky amount, and not to diminish your project, but I understood it to be a project that, there would be one, maybe two, windows, and not 7, of course, ground top.
Right, so
But, we never defined, I don't think we ever defined the word project,
project, right?
so.
I think it's another project problem.
I mean, that's just my thought, everybody's got a voice.
And I can clarify too, that we have worked with localities that have included a definition of project that clarifies that. And that's something we could certainly, take as a recommendation, work with staff and insert when it goes to the board of supervisors for consideration and action.
What are you suggesting?
That we could come up with a draft definition of project, but my initial recommendation to you all, absent anything else, would be that it could be comprised of multiple parcels and even leased areas of parcels, because solar in particular, we often see where the project area is more narrow than a parcel size, where someone is leasing a portion of a parcel, and so only a portion of a parcel is part of the project. So that may be something to clarify as well. And I can imagine in certain cases with wind projects that may also be the case, where only a portion of a project or a portion of a parcel is leased in part of that project area.
Similar to a cell tower.
Yeah.
Obviously, we meant that there could be more than one windmill on a parcel or a project, because we said they could be no closer than 150% of 680 feet.
Right.
You need a motion?
I didn't sign up to speak, but can I ask a question?
Sure.
So is there a limit as to how many cell towers that can be up on the roof? What's the question?
I'm sorry?
Is there a limit to the number of cell phone towers that can be put up on a mountain range?
Depending how we determine the outcome of this discussion, yes.
For cell phone
No,
towers?
not for cell
Cell
towers.
towers.
I'm just
Cell
asking.
tower.
I don't think so,
So why would this be any different?
because they're bigger and noisier.
I make a motion that that the planning commission, review the word project and come up with a determination as to what is a project.
So you're making a motion that we review the term project and define it, and come up with a definition to clarify exactly what project
We
is.
reword the motion that we will clarify the term project.
That's acceptable.
Okay, so we have a motion to clarify the terminology of project. Do we have a second? Second. Have a second. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. I'll work with you to get that formulated. My question, I guess, would be, can we do that and still proceed on to board of supervisors in January?
Yeah, so you may want to consider the motion a little differently, if I could suggest, and maybe multiple motions. So you may want to consider making a separate motion to make a recommendation on the comprehensive plan amendments by resolution, which I think you have a draft resolution, and that draft resolution is in the affirmative that you're supportive of that amendment. And that has to be in the form of a resolution by the planning commission. And then the second action hypothetically would be that you're recommending approval of the amendment to the zoning ordinance with the modification or addition of a definition clarifying the term project.
Okay. What's the commission's thoughts?
I don't have any objection to that.
Let's withdraw the motion and re-motion.
Or we could just amend it,
We can do that.
if you'd like to. So how do
Judge Shader,
you want to make that amendment since you made the motion?
I will just make that amendment as to how we said that.
Yeah.
You have that recorded, right?
Did you get all that word? So, okay,
Sorry, that was a
We,
mouthful.
upon recommendation from the Berkeley Group, we amend the motion we just had upon their recommendation to clarify all the above. That's, and Ms. Black has that in order. Everyone heard it. So everyone in favor of that, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, let it be known by saying aye. Motion carries 100%.
Sign up sheet.
Okay. I would like to take just a second to apologize for being a few minutes late. So the second one is Hunter Merritt.
That's all right.
I think you thought that was a sign-in sheet,
Yeah.
not a sign-up sheet.
Oh, okay.
I can share my thoughts, but they're not too much different.
Okay,
Thank you.
so you're good.
Great.
All right.
So,
Do we have a motion to close public hearing at this time?
So moved.
Have a motion to close public hearing. Do we have a second?
Second.
Have a second. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, let it be known by saying aye. We are now, public hearing is now closed.
do you want to go over regulations? We may have should have done that first.
Do you happen to still have the PowerPoint? So the second piece of this, let's go to one more slide. And I do want to touch on. So this map is appreciably similar to what the public had presented, Rev had presented as part of their letter. And this is attached to the comprehensive plan, and this is intended to be illustrative of the regulations and principally the buffer from transmission lines, or really the area within 2 miles of the transmission lines, as well as the buffers from municipal boundaries in certain zoning districts. And the only real difference here is you'll see the line that's east-west in orange, and that's the newly proposed transmission line. I don't know the exact status of it, but we were able to get that data through Ms. Black and incorporated that in the map. So it should be as current as we know it. Next slide. So again, as I mentioned, obviously with the policy changes leading into regulatory changes, and we've broken that out for both solar and wind, and there's certainly overlap in terms of the application submittal requirements, some distinctions and specific submittal requirements for wind over solar, but procedurally it's the same, and we hope it's an improvement and clarification of the process and very clear. We encourage and support a transparent public process, and we hope that this does that. And then minimum development standards addressing location, dimensions, setbacks, height, density within a 5-mile radius of projects, buffers and screening, ground cover requirements, fencing and wildlife corridor requirements, lighting and signage, and transmission line requirements. And then next slide, similarly for wind, but there are some unique considerations certainly for wind projects as well. It's also important to mention we tweaked the county's provisions for special use permits and clarified certain criteria for all special use permits, but we felt like that was important to clarify, and that's in the ordinance as well. And then I believe you have a slight revision when we were reviewing the ordinance, and I believe it's part 4, we're suggesting be modified to clarify. You have some existing regulations in your industrial district as well as your service district that generally apply to utility electrical generation facilities as well as transmission lines and even allow for battery storage. We didn't want to change those regulations as you have them. We are trying to just focus on wind and solar, and that's true for hydropower facilities. We wanted to make sure that we weren't changing anything with respect to those. And so when we ran across those, we wanted to make sure that those were addressed in the ordinance amendment as presented. So I would suggest that those red lines that you have be incorporated in what you're considering. So happy to address any questions. I think some of the discussion we just had with respect to the policy certainly applies here as well. Yes, sir.
The proposal is to increase the connection distance from 2 miles to 6 miles. What's your evaluation of that?
Yeah, so I think as we've talked about, when we, stepping back to when we originally presented this, which was a year ago, and I think we try to present a whole host of opportunities that localities consider. Some localities look at an overall density county-wide or jurisdiction-wide. Some localities do look at limiting the facilities to being located in a certain proximity to transmission lines, and certainly you all saw value to that. It creates a level of predictability, knowing where facilities could be located. Certainly in the case of wind, as you've heard from the developer here, that could preclude some opportunities that are viable depending on the location. But I would tell you about the proximity to transmission lines is generally the viability of solar in particular reduces the distance from that transmission line. If it's more than 2 miles, usually that connection is not going to be made. It just is too cost prohibitive to the project.
For solar?
For solar. The furthest that I've seen is 2.7 miles for a connection for the generation lead tie lines to the transmission infrastructure. And that was a good distance, but I think one of the considerations, especially for that, is the further you have a facility from that, the expectation is you're going to get transmission level infrastructure connecting that facility back to the point of interconnection in the substation. And yes, you can evaluate that as part of a project, you know, where is that transmission line going? How is it designed? How is it going to be constructed? What type of impact does it have on the other land uses, other properties between the project and the transmission corridor? The developer is correct. You could certainly remove that entirely from your ordinance and or increase that number, but you could remove it entirely and you could still evaluate the suitability of that connection.
That's strictly for wind, right?
It's for both. You could remove it for both. They've only commented on it with respect to wind.
Right.
And you could tweak one and not the other.
But you just said that with solar, you can't be more than 2.7.
I'm sure you could be, but
Is it cost effective?
it may be cost prohibitive to do that. And I don't know, I can't tell you that whether that same standard applies. I don't know. Apparently it may not, if they're suggesting that a 6 mile connection would still be viable.
If you didn't have a specified distance, wouldn't that be up to the developer to decide whether it's cost effective?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
The developer pays for the transmission line.
Usually, unless the utility has some partnership with that project. But I would also say this, there's nothing to preclude, you have existing transmission lines. There's nothing to preclude an extension of those either. So today, you know what that 2 mile buffer or that 2 mile distance is, but there's nothing to preclude additional transmission lines from being constructed either.
In the future.
In the future.
So theoretically, you could have a specified distance for solar and a different one for wind.
Correct, or none for one, and that's correct.
Or
And
none for all, and evaluate each specific proposal based on our ordinances.
Yes, sir, and the policy particularly, yep, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, usually I would tell you in localities that don't have that requirement, you know, we look at the impact to the abutting properties. You know, does it impact view sheds? You know, some communities that's important. Some it's not. You know, they are usually going to clear a significant area of land, at least you know through that corridor, and that can be more impactful in some areas and less so in others. You know, connections where it's crossing roadways. What does that look like if it's got to cross? You know, natural resources, wetland streams, you know, what does that look like? You know, can they underground it in some locations? Does it always have to be overhead? Those are the various considerations, regardless of whether you have a distance.
That's right. So if we made it 6 miles, that's not arbitrary. They can say, okay, we're at 6 miles, we can do it. You apply all these other factors to that proposal.
Yeah, I don't think the regulation is arbitrary. I think, you know, whether you set it at 2 or 6 miles, I think the thought process in setting that is it creates some predictability again about where these facilities are going to go within the county and what the tolerance is for the extension of those connections to that transmission line corridor. And I don't think that's arbitrary. I think you've done what you need to do to establish why that regulation potentially is not arbitrary, because you have just recommended policies that give the basis for the regulations that you're now considering.
Do you think a change is warranted?
It's really a local decision. You know, I can tell you the ramifications of not having one, or of not having a limit, or increasing the limit. And the ramifications of that essentially are that you could potentially end up with a project further away from a transmission line, and that there's going to be a gen-tie connection back to that transmission line.
An overhead connection.
Usually overhead. And now, what you may want to consider if you want to eliminate the requirement altogether is modifying the language that's in the policy. Because right now, I think it's pretty objective that it says, you know, facilities have to be within 2 miles. You could make it a little bit more subjective. Facilities should be within 2 miles of a transmission corridor, and facilities further away will be evaluated by X, Y, and Z. What are the important aspects of that review and of that project that you all would consider, impactful? Does it affect view sheds? Does it negatively impact adjacent property owners? Does it negatively impact, natural and cultural resources, things like that?
That's the question that I had. If the overhead lines 6 miles away, that would have to go to other people's property, correct?
Yeah, and usually they would either acquire the property, but more likely they'd acquire easements for that corridor across
And if the
property.
property owner doesn't want to provide an easement,
Well, I think it depends. It depends. I think as a utility, if Appalachian AEP is working with them, they can pursue eminent domain and condemnation. I don't know if they would do that or exercise that. Yeah.
yes.
May I say something? Yeah. If, in order for us to put a transmission line on a private landowner's property, we have to have a signed agreement with that landowner saying, yes, you can do that. And then we have to have approval from you guys and the commission and the board of supervisors saying that, yes, you can build that there. We do not have eminent domain. We cannot show up and do that. We pay for every cent of that is directly from us. We are not a publicly regulated utility.
If the landowner says no, what do?
Then we find a different way, or it kills the project. Everything that we do, we have to negotiate private agreements with that landowner for them to use their private property to build a project. If we want to put a wind turbine up on the side of the mountain and run back down into town to plug in, that whole path, I have to physically sit down and talk to every single person there and say, this is what we would like to do. Are you okay with doing that?
And
Give
you
them
would
to sign a legal agreement.
and you would pay them.
Yes.
But I don't think that was a statement he made,
No,
I think he said.
I want to draw a clear distinction. We do not have eminent domain rights. We do not work.
no, but
utilities.
AEP would have.
Right,
eminent
and I
domain.
think
An AEP would not be responsible, or that is not, we own that transmission line. They do not build it. They do not own it. They do not do anything in regards to that. If AEP wanted to extend the existing transmission line to serve their customers, that is completely separate. The transmission line from the wind farm to the substation in town, that's where it would go, is fully done at our dime, our rights, nothing
It
else.
seems that on reflection and looking at the two existing quarters, that our current 2 mile restriction is overly restrictive. And we should provide that 2 miles is fine, and under certain considerations, you could go 6 miles.
Yeah, and you could have belt and suspenders of that type of allowance in the policy and in the regulation, and we could help. If that was your recommendation, we could help.
Could you craft language
Yes,
to
sir.
address that?
Yes, sir.
But
Yeah,
then
and
again, I'd like to throw out there, it seems like we're beating a dead horse on a lot of this, as the old saying goes, because we've looked through this thoroughly and we've determined as a commission what we needed to do. And I know there's some things we might have to adjust, but it seems like some of it, we hear this and we hear that and it confuses us and we're losing our main focus, and it's kind of setting us back on what we need to be moving forward with.
Yeah, I look at what we've moved forward with, 2 miles, and looking at the existing transmission lines and looking at this map, and I view it as overly restrictive. And I would be in favor of some language that says 2 miles, and given such and such and such, you could go as far as 6 miles.
What is the such and such though?
That's the language I want him to. The things he just talked about,
I think we have worked with localities that have similar language, maybe with respect to other types of regulations and this type. But yeah, we could come up with something that added that level of additional discretion. If
It
you want
provides more development opportunity and more tax revenue to the county.
Yeah, and I do want to say, you know, my answer before is agnostic to who the developer is. It doesn't presume that it's this developer. There are opportunities and tools that can be utilized to extend a transmission line, whether, you know, they have a lease agreement or not. And to that point, and I think it's probably already occurred several times in the county, utility can go, and I believe even a private utility applicant can go and seek a certificate of public convenience and necessity from the State Corporation Commission to exempt themselves from local review of utility extensions. So that's something to be aware of, that they, you know, a utility extension in and of itself could be subject to the 15.22232, the state code that allows for review to determine whether it's in accordance with the comprehensive plan. But they could also go through that certificate process that would exempt them from that level of review. Public and the locality can still comment on it, but you don't have local land use jurisdiction over that utility project. And that's probably happened in the county. It may have happened with the most recent extension.
Most likely, because we did not review it.
All right, commission. What do y'all think?
You want a motion?
If you want to make one, we'll listen to it.
I move that we ask the Berkeley Group to explore the impacts and the appropriate language for extending the 2 mile corridor to 6 miles with appropriate considerations that I leave unsaid.
Okay.
What I'm getting at is, if it comes up, we have to consider the wildlife quarters, the set asides, all the other issues that we consider. That's kind of that's my motion.
Okay. So we have a motion to have the Berkeley Group to explore the terminology and possibility of expanding the 2 miles to 6 miles with certain requirements tied in with that. Is that what I'm hearing?
And is that specific to wind, your motion?
Wind, yeah.
And that's a recommendation of approval with that change?
Yes.
So we have that
Well
motion
said. Well said.
for the wind. Do we have a second? Okay.
And it does.
All right. Do we have any other motions? I voiced my opinion how I feel. We've reviewed it thoroughly, and it's you know, I feel good about the 2 miles myself. But what's y'all's thoughts?
I agree.
I mean, that's what we're here for, to discuss and do what's best for the county and the citizens therein, and keep moving. So, what's y'all's thoughts?
You heard mine.
I did, and I respect it.
Move along.
Let's move on.
Do we need to take a motion on anything as far as that goes? Okay.
I think you do want to make a recommendation
That it's
on the amendment,
on the amendment.
whether to adopt it as drafted or recommend denial.
Right,
And
but no further, no conversation, I mean, here, as far as
The 6
the
months.
the 2
Yeah.
to 6 months,
Right.
but yes,
Yeah,
you're right.
yeah, we hadn't got that far yet.
It's all right.
Well, that's good though. Okay. Is there any other concerns or questions about the draft?
We are getting clarification on what a project is, right?
Correct.
And that, and
With a recommendation for approval,
Mhm.
so that we're not backtracking here and coming back in January. It will proceed on to the Board of Supervisors.
okay.
Does everyone agree?
Agreed. In January for the board supervisors for approval.
Is there something I need to know?
Well, I think we're, convening a new board. I don't know if they're, how much time they've had to, they're not even on board yet, how much time they've had to think through this issue. So that'd be my thought.
Would you prefer the planning commission to review that definition and terminology of the project before we send it on? That would give it another month.
Is there a timeline? Help me understand why January has to happen.
There's no timeline. Is there, I can't think of anything off my head right now legally that once we hold a public hearing, wait a minute, we've got to make the recommendation to the Board of Supervisors and they have 90 days to make
take an action.
an action.
I believe that's correct.
So they've got
That is
9 days to review.
Yes, yeah.
Fine with it.
If my memory serves me correct.
I thought you were asking for a decision in January. Just think
Well,
about
I was headed that way. I'm ready, I'll be honest with you guys, I am so tired of this and I am so ready to get it, put it to bed.
I'm not in favor of presenting this to the board.
Sure.
I think you could schedule a public hearing at, February, maybe even March.
March.
But I don't think it's critical that you do it at January.
Is it sufficient to have that recommendation of the terminology of project come back to us for review, and then us proceed to give that a little extra time?
I think you could reaffirm, your motion. We can draft that up and give it back and you can reaffirm it, not relitigate it.
Not have to do this
Right,
again, basically.
right.
Okay.
So can we do that?
The commission. I'm just like,
How's the commission feel about that? Did you have something? We
Yeah, I
kind of
mean,
spoke at the same
I
time, sorry.
thought we were kind of under a deadline from the board, from the board
honestly,
of commissioners. I mean, that's what I thought Fant was hammering us to get this thing done.
and we are. There wasn't a set deadline by the Board of Supervisors. It was a recommendation that we take a look at our language to shore it up, and therefore that's what we've been doing for the last year.
Yeah. Which we did.
Right.
And I mean, if we're asked to do something and we did it,
It was a recommendation. It wasn't anything that was set in stone with a deadline, a hard deadline date. Typically, they would formalize a motion and a second and said you have to have this done by a certain amount of time. But that was not the case. I could not, and I did go back and review minutes. There was not anything formally wrote that it had to be done in a certain time frame.
So we can get this clarified with the project and then present it to the board all at once or all at once.
I think what Mr. Boyer was looking at is there's some change of Board of Supervisor members, and he would like to get them kind of acquainted before they review some of this stuff. And another month out, I think would be, you tell me if I'm wrong, I think it would be better, give them time to adapt a little bit and get caught up on things.
They're going to be going through a pretty intense, they're all work. So employed full-time work, so this is, they do this over all time. And they're gonna be making a bunch of decisions in January, and I don't wanna overwhelm them with.
I respect that.
I think it's fair to them to give them time to think through what questions they might have. So it's been a year and a month, I think that's everybody has.
So by the same token, we're the same thing. We got jobs too.
I'm not saying, but you've been working on it for a year. They've been working on 1,000 projects for a year as well. So it's not.
I mean,
Yeah.
you know, just a little,
Nobody put I don't know that we put a timeline on this project.
well,
So
what I'm
I
saying
think
is,
it's not.
we got jobs too.
Hey, so listen, I'm not telling you that you don't have a job. All I'm telling you is what they have on their plate is going to be significant. There's some brand new members on this board that may not understand everything that's going on. There's going to be a bunch of rules they have to think about. There's a budgeting process they have to think about. There's just many things. So what I asked for was a month to get them appointed to the new jobs. You can say, you can put it in front of them. It doesn't bother me. That's what I asked for. That's all.
We're just trying to show up the definition and then give it to them.
So, public hearing could potentially be done in February. We can go to March if need be.
I think you can give them time to review that you'll have better feedback from.
Sure. And I want that.
That's all I'm saying.
I don't want that. I don't think the commission would.
Yeah, it may be more straightforward.
Right, I don't want him just to do it just because.
All right.
It's, so,
I would have much preferred to have this done before the transition, but.
right. It's, so what we're looking at as a commission is getting the definition and terminology of project clarified. We will review it in January, confirm it if we like it, and give the Board of Supervisors, the new hands there, time to get adjusted. And then we will, if we like the definition terminology, we'll forward it to them for the, I guess, final review that would be prior to the public hearing, correct?
We have to have another public hearing.
Yes, public hearing for the Board of Supervisors, when we're ready to adopt it.
Right. So,
But tonight, we're basically making a recommendation that we will
right.
accept what the Berkeley Group proposes in January, and then we will then formally move forward to the Board of Supervisors in late February, March.
Yeah. So, yeah. Gives us.
Probably March, just because I would like the Board of Supervisors to be able to chew on it a little bit.
Yeah. So we'll give the commission an opportunity to review that definition of the project. So, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So do we need to take a vote on that or anything? Let's do a roll call vote on that, that we will take the definition that's sent to us about the project and review it in January. And the definition terminology of that terminology of project, and we will review it in January. Then we will send it, if we like it and approve it, we will send it to the Board of Supervisors for review. Is that correct?
Right.
Did that sound correct?
That recommendation?
I think that works. Yeah. You've held the public hearing. I think there's appropriate notice on that, so I think it's fine.
Okay. All right. So Ms. Black will take a roll call vote.
Mr. Boyer?
Aye.
Mr. Felicity?
Aye.
Mr. Ballard? Mr. Noblett?
Aye.
Mr. Ward?
Aye.
Mr. Funk? And Mr. Ball?
Aye.
And Mr. Walls?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right.
those are. We're gonna go on into Cool Breeze Campground.
We can do one of two things, Commission. We can keep rolling on, or we can take a short 5-minute recess and, come back in to review the Cool Breeze Village Phase 2, Section 3 preliminary subdivision plat review. What's the wishes of the commission?
Press on.
Press on.
So, thanks, sir.
Thank you all.
Just be in touch. Let me just kind of update you guys a little bit about the Cool Breeze Campground. In your planning commission packet, I put in numerous documentation from where we reviewed it, back in June 23rd, 2022. The planning commission reviewed the preliminary subdivision plat for Cool Breeze Campground. Upon that review, the following comments were made by the planning commission to add and amend the plat before the final review. We have that with us tonight. Mr. Ward or James Ward is the attorney for Mr. Sales. He brought this to me for the final preliminary review. There are several, you might want to pass those around. He brought those to me last month. Prior to that review, I had also wrote Mr. Ward a letter just trying to shore him up on what was required of Mr. Sales.
These the same?
They're all the same. It should be all the same. There might be one or two together.
Okay,
Yeah, because
looks like those two.
there's two.
Okay.
As part of that review in June of 2022, Planning Commission required that the language be added to the drain field area where the septic drain field was. The Virginia Department of Health had to sign the official final plat. And then the Virginia Department of Transportation also had to sign the final plat. Tonight, presented to you is the final plat with those signatures and that amendment to the drain field. The reason for this, it's my understanding with the county attorney, this was a special use permit that happened several years ago. Each time he decides to make more lots for sale, we have to revisit the special use permit. So for this one, we're adding what I believe it was maybe 11 additional lots for that. So my question is to the planning commission, upon this review, are you satisfied with staff proceeding in regards to public hearing in January for the amendment to Cool Breeze Campground?
They satisfied all of our comments.
So you've got my letter to Mr. Sales from our last meeting dated June 23rd, 2022. They satisfied those requirements based on your meeting. The reason that he didn't resubmit this was because of the time frame. It was getting close to winter. The lots won't sell. He didn't want to create the parcels until he knew that he could sell them because he has to pay the revenue on those. That's the only reason I couldn't get him to just create the entire subdivision, because it would be costly for him to have to pay for parcel property taxes on each parcel until they're sold. Thus, we have to come back and revisit the special use permit every time he creates lots. So my question is to you tonight, is the commission okay with what has been proposed by Mr. Sales tonight.
So you're satisfied that he satisfied all of our previous comments?
I am, yes. I am satisfied that he done what the planning commission asked.
Then I move we,
So this is our preliminary review. We'll actually do the formal special use permit and hold a public hearing in January.
All right,
you need a motion to approve this preliminary.
one quick question. Commission, do you have any questions for Ms. Black or anything concerning, this plat review?
Is this septic area, the drain field area, gonna serve all these lots?
Those 11 lots.
And he's got an arrow window of 56 that says, 5550 will be served by future septic area to be installed.
That was the identification, I believe, that was required to be added to the plat.
So that has not been installed yet, I'm assuming. Correct?
Does it have a,
If you,
Justin, do you see a Virginia Department of Health permit number on there?
No, they don't have the
Not-
septic permit.
Not yet, okay.
There
just-
is one for the existing
Right,
septic.
but there, we have them
No, it
numbers.
does. Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought that it did, but I was thinking that we had them clarify that additional drainage area.
So this is a good go on all 11 of them, then.
Yeah, he done what was requested of him by the planning commission at the first preliminary review.
I think it's
This
good
is
to go
our
then.
second preliminary review,
Right.
and he's finalized what we asked.
I think it's good to go.
Sounds like it.
So,
do we have a motion? Do we have a motion to, approve as is?
just move to be able to hold public hearing for the special use.
Okay. Do we have a motion to move forward with the public hearing for the special use permit?
I so move.
I'll second.
All right, have a motion, have a second. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, let it be known by saying aye. This motion carries 100%. Good. Now.
Staff does not have anything else to discuss with the planning commission.
Okay. We haven't seen Mr. Boyer in a while, but it's good to have him with us tonight.
I'm happy to be here.
Wrong Boyer, but that's okay. I was glad he's here too. But anyway, our county administrator, it's good to have him with us tonight. Do you have anything that you'd like to share with the commission? Anything going on we need to be aware of or look into? Just whatever you want to say. We'd like to give you the opportunity to update us on projects or whatever's happening, the happenings of Grayson.
Well, there was an interesting project that came from AEP last week. AEP, there's and I could get this wrong, somebody maybe will report me here. In 2020, West Virginia passed, Governor signed, I believe it's called the Virginia Clean Economy Act. Is anybody familiar with that?
Yes, that's why we're here tonight.
Virginia Clean Economy Act, okay? Put some requirements on AEP. And one of the requirements was certain types of clean energy or what have you. AEP has proposed to have a battery backup to the power in White Top. So they'll take, you know how electric cars work, there's a battery backup. So AEP's going to acquire some land, wants to acquire some land in White Top. And they're gonna put these huge batteries, try to simplify, these huge batteries there on a certain part of the land, tie into the lines. So when the power goes out at White Top, you'll have a backup. This is the first I don't know anything about this. This is the first I heard about it. So how long would the backup power last?
It's a good question. Can I give you an argument for them, White Top?
Okay, let's go.
If AEP would take a recommendation that I gave them a long time ago, spend a little money, move their power lines out by the road where they can access them, instead of through the mountain up there, they'd have a lot less trouble. I know I am. I'm the last one on that line that comes across. I know all about
I
it.
say the power outage is due to the lines and not anything else.
But it takes a while, obviously, when the power goes out. It takes a while to get that done.
Because where their lines run is through the mountain and they have no access by vehicle. So here they are having to carry everything in to get it fixed. If they'd spend a little money and get approval through the counties to relocate those lines by the roadside within the right of way or even a little off, be much easier on everybody.
So that's just the way it is at the house. It comes over Hidden Valley. The power goes off, you look up the road, I got power, and you look down the road, I got power. We don't have any power.
Let me give you, so these batteries, these huge batteries, it'll supply power to the folks at White Top for a total
2 hours.
2 hours.
So if the line breaks, if the line is broken, all the batteries in the world ain't gonna get power to them.
2 hours, you got 2 hours of power. So I asked a simple question. What's the project cost? Well, I guess the first question I ask is the power come from wind? Because it's a clean economy act, right? Is the power coming from, are we building solar, are we building wind, what are we building? Well, it's coming from existing lines. Okay, so I'm trying, okay, what percentage of those existing lines do we get with clean energy, with solar? We can't tell you that. I don't know. Okay, what's the project going to cost? $42 million, 40
For 2 hours of power.
For 2 hours of power. And what's the liability on those batteries if they get too hot and explode?
Okay, so there's another question. Well, we've got to put a system in where there's valve into your 911 and there's some type of phone system like you have in an airport or whatever, stuff like that. What are the batteries made of? Are they made? Are these cobalt, lithium? What's the disadvantage to the economy? Taking out lithium. What's that cost? Anyway,
How long do they last?
Point is, take care of that. You gotta have that too.
Now, as part of the Clean Energy Act, AEP did not want to increase their infrastructure. So what they do is they buy a renewable energy credit from people who have solar and wind. For example, I have solar in my house. I'm going, doesn't make any difference how much I use. It's what my system produces. So my system will produce between 8 and 9 megawatts a year. Each megawatt is sold to AEP, and the escrow company that has that pays me anywhere, whatever the going rate is. So when Virginia first started a couple of years ago, they were like $53. Now they're down to about $43. Now initially, in 2015 when I started, I could only sell to Pennsylvania because Virginia didn't have that. And it started out at good money, $40-something, went all the way down to $2. And that's because more and more people got solar, more and more people got wind. So AEP is mandated to make so many megawatts or gigawatts in clean energy without them having to build the infrastructure. They just buy all these little megawatts and gigawatts from people who have solar throughout the county, or throughout the state.
It's all a learning process. Trying to understand.
Would relocating all the power lines to roadside be cost prohibitive?
Don't know the answer to that. I'm just asking.
Put them underground, we won't have any.
They would say it costs too much up front, but in the long run, they would save money because they're under work on. So. Hey, these are good bunch anyway.
I said, I bet the people in White's I'd rather have $40 million than 2 hours of power.
You got that right. Most already bought generators anyway.
That's all I got for you. Thank you for that.
Thank you. We appreciate the update. Ms. Blake, anything?
One thing that I would like to tell the commission, it's my understanding that Mr. Noblett has decided to retire from the planning commission.
I've been here long
Tonight is
enough.
his last night with us after how many?
I thought it's 12, but I told you 16. It's been a long time.
In a long time, so. Thank you, Mr. Noblett, for your service to the
Absolutely.
community.
I enjoyed it.
Appreciate
Thank you very much. Nothing else.
I just appreciate you guys being here.
We do appreciate you, Mr. Nobley.
I appreciate y'all.
You've been
Thank you.
very, very good to work with, and we appreciate all you've done
It's been very interesting.
for the county and on the planning commission. Thank you very much.
We really heard some nice things. We heard where the people threatened to kill us.
Absolutely.
Lisa's not here, make the motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
All right.
I wish everybody Merry Christmas while we're on the floor.
That's what I was getting ready to say. Before we take that second, everyone do have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I wish you the very best, you and your families. And now, do we have a second on Mr. Noble's motion to adjourn? Have a second, all in favor? Any opposed? Planning Commission's now adjourned. Thanks, everyone, for showing up and the work you do.
Good luck to you. Thank you.
Good pleasure.
It's